Alright guys, welcome back to the JellyBeanSniper.net NFL podcast. Now yesterday we took a look at the AFC teams and what they needed to do in the offseason, and today we're just going to jump right into it, and we're going to look at the NFC teams and see what moves they need to make. This is going to be a little less interesting because there are a lot of bad teams, and there's really only a couple who I think can jump back into the playoffs, but every season we're always wrong, and one of these bottom feeders is going to be good. So let's see if we can figure out what moves need to be made to figure out who is going to jump back into it. Now, first off, we'll start with the NFC East. First off, we have the Dallas Cowboys. They won the division. They were a surprise team. I didn't think they'd be any good. And they even managed to get a playoff victory, so that doubled Tony Romo's total. I don't think DeMarco Murray's going to be back. And I don't think that's a big deal, but I do think they're going to need to draft someone. Again, much like every other team at the bottom of the draft, I think they're just sitting there hoping they get their hands on like a Todd Gurley, Melvin Gordon, whoever is sitting there. I think they're going to be looking at a running back in the draft. But I think their biggest need is absolutely 100% the defense. Anybody on defense. They could use secondary help. They could use linebackers. They could use defensive line. Anywhere on that defense, if you can get a good player, take them. Rolando McClain was a pretty good player for him last season. Definitely a surprise for somebody who retired 3 times. But that's one player. Now, Sean Lee should be back, but he gets injured a lot, so I wouldn't bank on him. I think they just need whoever they can get their hands on defense. They're going to need safety help. They're going to need some cornerback help. I mean, Orlando Scandrick is okay, but I don't think he should be your number one. What's his... I forgot the... why did I forget his name? The other cornerback. The second-year player or whatever who ended up getting, like, benched and sent home or something. I don't think he's going to be back. So they're definitely going to need some secondary help. Linebackers, you could use some more guys to help McClain and Sean Lee. And who knows what McClain's going to do next season. He could retire again for all we know. So I think you just need some pieces there. You still have Rod Marinelli there. He did an amazing job with this defense, and I think if they can add to that and keep up with what they were doing on offense, then I think they'll be okay. I do think I know it's a popular choice. I think they're going to keep Des Bryant and get rid of DeMarco Murray, because I think DeMarco Murray is way more replaceable than Des Bryant is. Des Bryant is a top 5 wide receiver in the league, and DeMarco Murray had one good season. So it's hard to say whether or not this is actually going to be the norm going forward. Maybe DeMarco Murray will just be a solid NFL running back for the next 5 or 6 years, and ignore Father Time and ignore the amount of carries he had. But he was injury riddled before. He got hurt this season. He managed to be okay. He didn't miss a game, but I don't think that's going to last forever. Yeah, I mean, the Cowboys are easy. Next up are the Philadelphia Eagles. A lot of people are saying quarterback because that's such a glaring need. Everyone's talking about maybe them trading up to get Marcus Mariota. I don't think that's that plausible, especially not if the Cleveland Browns want him, because the Cleveland Browns are going to have a lot more to offer. Then you're going to have to beat out whoever they're going to try and trade to get there. And if you're the Eagles, are you trying to just go for the number 2 overall pick, assuming that the Buccaneers take Jameis Winston? And who knows, maybe the Buccaneers really like Mariota and they just take him. Then what do you do? So I think with where this team is, I say you give Nick Foles another chance. I don't think he's the long-term answer, but I think he'll get you through. I think he can still get you to the playoffs. And then you can just kind of hope for something better after that. The big news coming out of Philadelphia this week, and this is stupid. This is why I love NFL news. Riley Cooper, the wide receiver, who ended up having a pretty good year for him, we all know what he said at a concert, last summer. It was a racially fueled remark. If you want to know more about it, look it up. I'm not going to get into that here. That is definitely old news. But he was in trouble for racial things. The news came out that a Philadelphia Eagles official calendar had him, and I don't know why it took 2 weeks into the month. He is a player listed for Black History Month. Now, I'm sure this is just an oversight, but why wouldn't you want to put I don't know, one of your black players there, or just maybe one of your players. You have 52 other players to choose from. You chose the one player with a racist history. Not even saying that he is a racist, but the fact that he made those remarks, like, why would that be the player you put there? I just don't understand. But as far as other needs for the Eagles, you got to figure they're pretty good. They're pretty set at running back. LaShawn McCoy, top 3 running back. Quarterback could be an issue. Receiver, I mean, Cooper isn't a solid number 1, not even maybe a number 2, but a good number 3. Jordan Matthews had a pretty good season. Will Jeremy Maclin be back? So maybe you're looking at another wide receiver. Offensive line, they were just hurt this year, and that cost them a playoff spot. But I think this team can rebound there. Defense, yeah, they could use some pieces, but I don't think there's any glaring needs there. I think this is just much like the Dolphins. There are a couple needs, but realistically, you just need some more consistency, and you need some better luck. They have a better coach. Chip Kelly is a great coach. He's definitely an innovator. I mean, he changed the college football game, and now you're looking at all these quarterbacks coming out, and are they going to fit the NFL? I think 5 years from now, that's just going to be the norm. This is what quarterbacks are going to do. And then eventually we're going to go back to the power run game. It's just going to be cyclical. I think that's where we're going. It's the same thing everyone talked about. Is the 3-4 better, or is the 4-3 better? You just went every 5 years. The trend changed. You had a team like the Patriots, and like the Steelers have run a 3-4 forever. But, the Patriots generally run a 3-4, but they'll kind of alternate a little bit depending on what the situation calls for. Whereas I look at the Buffalo Bills, and in the last 3 seasons, they have run 3 different defensive schemes. They went from 3-4 to 4-3 back to 3-4. So, defensive schemes are cyclical, and I think offensive schemes are cyclical, but last longer. Right now, we're in a very pass-happy era. But for all we know, 10 years from now, the running game will then be the norm, because then you're going to have all these defenses built to stop the passing game, and then no one's going to be able to stop the running game, and you're just going to run down their throats. And that's basically how the Seahawks managed to get to 2 straight Super Bowls, is all these teams are looking for the pass, and they're just going to run it. So, I think that's cyclical, but Chip Kelly is definitely the innovator behind that in the college game. He is a solid coach. I think they have a better chance, and I think they'll make the playoffs next season, even if it is only as a wild card team. I think they have a legitimate chance at running after the division title. I think Dallas is going to come down a bit. Instead of 12-4, maybe 10-6, 11-5, and I think the Eagles could go up to 11-5, 12-4. I think those two will compete for the division. But I think one team to keep an eye on in the entire NFL, one bad team that will come into the playoffs next season, I think, can be the New York Giants. They have Odell Beckham. We all know how phenomenal he was. Eli Manning had a good season. Not a lot of people like to talk about it because it's Eli Manning, but I think Eli had a better season than Peyton did. And not a lot of people want to say that. Now, the team around him was pretty terrible. They need to solidify that offensive line. They could use some defensive pieces. But getting Victor Cruz back and pairing him up with Odell Beckham Jr., their running game, I mean, forget the running game. You can just pass the ball. But they had some pretty good running totals. I mean, Jennings, 176 yards, 131 yards. Or no, Williams had 131 and 110. I mean, yeah, maybe they go after a running back in the second round or something, or maybe they try and sign someone off the street. I don't know. Sort of the lower down guys who are going to be available. I don't think they're going to make a run at DeMarco Murray. That's not how the Giants roll. They're not going to run after an Adrian Peterson if he gets released. Marshawn Lynch, if he got released, I could see the Giants maybe trying to make a run at him. I don't know if he'd want to go there, but if Marshawn Lynch... I know now the story is that he's going to get re-signed to a long-term deal, and now he's contemplating retirement, I guess. More on that when we get to Seattle. But I think the Giants, they could use a running back, but I think they just need to solidify that offensive line, and I think you're going to see this 6-10 record go to a 10-6 record. So I really do think the Giants... I'm sick of seeing them win too, but they could be your dark horse team. Even though everyone's trying to bury... Tom Coughlin. Everyone's trying to bury him and bury Eli Manning. Don't be surprised if ring number 3 could come in the next couple of years. That's all I'm going to say. And then last and certainly least, and a team with the number 5 overall pick and next season could have the number 1 overall pick, is the Washington Redskins. This team does not need 1 or 2 or 5 players to become a better team. They need a structural overhaul. Now, I'm not saying that Dan Snyder needs to go. A bad owner can cripple a team, yes. See the Oakland Raiders and the fact that they're looking promising now for the first time in a decade. A bad owner can cripple a team forever, but sometimes it's luck. I don't think Ralph Wilson was necessarily a terrible owner for the Buffalo Bills. I think old-fashioned, yes. And not in the way, like, Al Davis wanted to run the team and sort of do things his way. Ralph Wilson kind of just didn't want to spend a lot of money because he was worried about it and you never knew. And I think he was just kind of cheap in his old age. Whereas Al Davis was just like, here is a 53-man roster. 40 of these guys won't make any other team in the NFL. Win a Super Bowl. I don't think Dan Snyder is that bad. But looking at it now, I think he is certainly the worst owner in the NFL right now. I don't think that's even an argument. And they need structure. I like the guy they brought in. Excuse me. Frog in my throat. I like the guy they brought in to be the GM. I read his ESPN story, or was it Grantland? Maybe it was ESPN. I always get them backwards now. You know, it seems like he's managed to get his life back on track, which is good. And I think he could assemble a good team, but will Dan Snyder let him? This is going to be a tough job for him. And I don't think Washington, they need a quarterback. You know, everyone makes a big story about how they omitted Robert Griffin III on their season ticket holder newsletter. I think that should be expected, and I think if you're Robert Griffin III, if you still think that you're the uncontested starter after being benched, then you just don't get it. Running game, Alfred Morris seems to be pretty good, but what do you expect this guy to do? They're always behind, so you're not going to run the ball as much. Wide receiver, you got Deshaun Jackson. You figure he'll stick around. Pierre Garçon, I don't know if he's a free agent or not. He's a solid number 2 option if that's what he's going to be. Tight end, they keep expecting Reed to break out. I don't know if he's ever going to. Offensive line, they've got some solid pieces there. Trent Williams is the left tackle. He's really good. You know, they could use a couple other pieces there. Defense, Brian Arakpo, it seems like he's played his last game in a Washington Redskins uniform. He even said that after he went on IR. But you've still got Ryan Kerrigan. You know, you've still got some pieces there, but you need a lot on that defense too. But this is another team that comes down to the quarterback, and Dan Snyder should have run Robert Griffin III out of town last season. And that's, again, to no fault of Robert Griffin's. But I think that knee injury, I don't know if he'll ever recover from it. And with that kind of injury to a quarterback whose feet are a big part of his game, and I'm not saying he has to run for 150 yards every single game, but you look at somebody like Russell Wilson, he doesn't have to run all the time. But it creates plays. The same as Ben Roethlisberger. The same as Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers in that divisional round game against the Seahawks with a calf injury did not look the same. There were a ton of plays he left on the field because he could not do the things he usually did. So his feet are important, and you're going to take out one of his legs, and you're not going to address that at all because you're just going to assume Kirk Cousins can step in and be your guy. You have Colt McCoy, who is a career backup, extended his career by about 5 years. Don't be surprised if he's starting for the Jets or the Bills or something like that next season. But come on, Redskins. We could be looking at another 10 bad years of Redskins football. It's just a fact of life, and it's unfortunate because I don't like seeing any team being that bad for that long. Not anymore at least. I was perfectly fine with Dallas sucking for a while, but that's because I was still bitter about losing 2 straight Super Bowls to them. But now, I'm over it. Go Cowboys. Next up, we're going to go to the NFC North. And start off here with the Green Bay Packers, a team that a lot of people thought should have won that game against the Seahawks. And they debate whether the Seahawks won it or the Packers lost it. It takes 2 to tango. But it showed that the Packers are not a perfect team yet. Now, this is the same argument they've had even when they won the Super Bowl. Defense, defense, defense. Aaron Rodgers is the best quarterback in the game right now. His wide receivers are solid. He could use a tight end, but it's not a necessity. He's got enough weapons, but a tight end would definitely help. Eddie Lacy is inconsistent at a running back, but that could just be a factor of the offense. You put him on the Seahawks, and maybe he's a consistent 1,500-yard runner every single season. I don't know. It's hard to tell. Brian Bulaga, the right tackle, is a free agent, and you would assume they're going to bring him back because that's just what the Packers do. Defensively, they need help. They need to figure out where they're going to put Clay Matthews. Is he going to be a middle linebacker, an outside linebacker? Are they going to bring B.J. Raji back? Is A.J. Hawk going to be released? What are they going to do with the secondary? Who's coming back? Who's not? It's a lot of question marks about that defense. And it's hard to expect them to do good when you have such a rapid-fire offense, so they often look worse for the wear. The defense can play well. They held Philadelphia to 20 points even though they scored 53. They held Chicago to 14 even though they scored 55. And they held Minnesota to 10 even though they scored 42. So, and you can argue 2 of those 3 teams are bad offenses. I get it. But at the end of the day, they can still win and hold the defense, hold the team to not a lot of points. So, their defense just needs some work. And is Dom Capers, is he gone or is he still there? Because I feel like if he's still there, he needs to be gone. But I do think that this is a team, they lost to the Buffalo Bills because Aaron Rodgers had a bad game. His worst game probably of his career. Again, speaks to the Buffalo defense playing extremely well. Also getting extremely lucky with some of those drops. But their defense could not stop the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo Bills scored 21 points. Meanwhile, the next week they held Tampa Bay to 3. You need a defense to stop a team like that and hold. Even if they had a good enough defense to maybe hold the Bills to 14 or something like that. The defense just does not give them a chance sometimes. They lost 44 to 23 against the Saints. The Saints, who went 7-9. And that was inflated because they play in a terrible division. They split their division, but they still play in a terrible division, and they're a terrible team. So they need some work on their defense above all else. One team, however, that's going to regress quite a bit, I think, is going to be the Detroit Lions. Because Ndamukong Suh is leaving. I think that's a foregone conclusion. He made it clear he's probably not coming back. I think they're assuming that he's not going to come back. I don't think they're going to franchise him because I think it's something like $25 million. I don't think they can afford to franchise him. Their offense was abysmal, except for a couple games here and there. But they looked good against the Giants. They lost to Carolina when Carolina's defense was bleh. They lost to the Bills and Kyle Orton. They barely edged out New Orleans and Atlanta and Miami. They got blown out by the Patriots. Then their offense looked good against Chicago and Tampa Bay and then came back to earth against Minnesota. So, and I can't figure out why. They don't have a running game that's consistent. Joique Bell, they'll run the ball with him, but nobody put up a 100-yard running game. There were no 3-yard running games, but no one put up a 100-yard running game. You have Calvin Johnson and Golden Tate, who are both solid receivers. Golden Tate had that stretch when Calvin Johnson was injured where he took over. I believe they both made the Pro Bowl. So it comes down to Matthew Stafford. and his inability to... He can put up a ton of yards, but for some reason they cannot put up the points. I mean, 346, 291, 246, 293, 231, 185, 299, 325, 280. That was probably his best performance. 280 yards against Miami, because that was a really solid defense. 183, 264 against the Patriots. Patriots can't stop the deep ball, and the Patriots were up. They won 34-9, so I think there was a lot of garbage yards there. Again, 390 to Chicago, 311 to Tampa Bay, 153 to Minnesota, 243 to Chicago, 217 against Green Bay, in a game that was for the division. There's something wrong here. The Lions should have been an offensive juggernaut, and I don't know if it's just Jim Caldwell not being a very good coach. He's a calm coach. He's better than Schwartz as a head coach, but he's not... Something about this offense, I don't know what they need. Maybe Josh McDaniels from 2007. Maybe that's what they need. But this is terrible. One team with some promise, though, is the Minnesota Vikings. They went 7-9. Even after the Adrian Peterson thing, I'm not going to bury dirt on them because I feel like they did suspend him when it initially happened. They were going to bring him back, and then they put him on that commissioner's exemption list or whatever. They suspended him a game. That's better than some other teams do, so I will give them credit for that. They were going to bring him back, but again, that's something that's not even technically illegal in some states, so it's hard to judge that because you have to use your bias. Because some people view that as, like myself, beating the crap out of your child, but other people view it as discipline. It's iffy. It's not like knocking your girlfriend out in an elevator or pouring bleach on them or punching your pregnant girlfriend. That's just abuse no matter where you are. Whipping your child for misbehaving in some areas is accepted. So that's a little more of a gray area, but they still suspended him. So I do think that I'm not going to bury them for that. But at the end of the day, they're going to need a running back. McKinnon looked okay in stretches. Asiata was just racking up those goal line touchdowns. I don't know if Peterson's going to be back right now. They're saying all the right things and saying that he's going to be back, but you never know whether or not that's true. But Teddy Bridgewater has shown some promise. Their wide receivers, Jennings might be a little overpaid. He might not be there again. Cordarrelle Patterson seems to be kind of a bust. Who knows what's going on with him? Or at least they don't know how to use him. So, they could use some wide receiver help if they do get rid of Jennings. And they could probably use one anyways. What do they pick? They pick number 11. Defensively, they could use some linebacking help. Their defensive line seems pretty solid. Cornerbacks, maybe there's some depth there. Safety, they have, forgot his name. I want to say it's Smith. I feel like he doesn't have, like, a popping name. This is what happens if you don't take notes, folks. But they have one safety who is pretty solid. Defense. They have Captain Munnerlin at cornerback. Xavier Rhodes. Harrison Smith. There we go. I knew it was Smith. You have some solid secondary there, but you could still maybe use a little bit more. But I think it's just a young team developing and maturing. They won 7 games. They probably had no right to win 7 games. I'm trying to think of who they beat that was really an upset. You can argue the Falcons were better than them. You can argue the Panthers were better than them. But really, they didn't win any games they shouldn't have won. If anything, maybe they should have beat Buffalo in that game. With a more mature team, they win that one. Maybe this season they don't split with the Bears and they win both. Maybe a more mature team manages to win that game in Miami by 2 points. So there's some games there where an improved team could do a little bit better, and I think they're going to make some progress. But is Adrian Peterson going to be back, or is it going to be another running back entirely in the fold? They're picking high enough in the draft where if they can go with whoever in the first round, and then in the second round go after a running back. So they don't have to target a running back at number 11. Or they could just bring back Adrian Peterson. I think at this point, I think it'll be okay. I think that'll be more widely accepted. It's a lot easier to bring back him than, say, if the Ravens brought back Ray Rice. And people were supporting, women were out there in Ray Rice jerseys supporting them bringing him back. So I think Adrian Peterson's going to, he had a lot more support out of the gate. So I think if Richie Incognito can come back, then I think Adrian Peterson can come back. I think the only guy who can't come back at this point is Aaron Hernandez. I think he's the only player who would never be able to come back to the league. That might have something to do with the fact that Aaron Hernandez is going to be in jail for the rest of his life. It's Massachusetts. We don't do executions up here. Next up, we have the Bears. 5-11. Jay Cutler may or may not be there next season. They got a new head coach in John Fox, who's kind of boring, but he does a solid job. His last 2 gigs, he got the team to the Super Bowl at one point, so that could be coincidence, but he got him there. So he'll do a good enough job. He might not win you a Super Bowl, but when you're 5-11 and your team's in utter turmoil, your defense is terrible, and your offense is underachieving, I think you'll take it. I think if you can tell a Chicago Bears fan right now, hey, in 5 years you will probably make a Super Bowl appearance, I think they'll take it considering what they got right now. Now, quarterback is an issue that should be addressed, but I don't know if they can. They're sitting there at number 7. You got to assume if one of the quarterbacks gets to number 6, the Jets are taking him. I don't see Mariota thriving in Chicago anyways. I don't think he should go to a cold weather team because you do need a stronger arm. That's the only reason E.J. Manuel got drafted was because he had that nice big arm. And he had, that's what, when the Bills took him and they interviewed him, well, why'd you take him? He's got a big body, a strong arm, and a big hands to grip the ball. In the North, you need a strong arm, a good grip. Like, you need that kind of arm strength. You need, Aaron Rodgers likes to say he wants to overinflate the ball as high as he can get it before it explodes. That's the kind of player you need playing in a northern, Northeast, Midwest, up in the North, cold weather team. And Marcus Mariota is definitely someone who should be playing in a warmer weather climate. And I think he'd be fine I think he'd be fine on Tampa Bay, honestly, because I think Lovie Smith doesn't care what happens with the offense. He just wants them to win. But you're not going to find a good solution in Chicago for quarterback because Jay Cutler is honestly the best free agent or trade acquisition you can make at quarterback this offseason, so I don't think you're going to get any better there. So I think Chicago, you just got another deal of Jay Cutler. You got another year of Jay Cutler. That's just how it's going to be. I've heard some people say maybe Brandon Marshall gets released. I don't 100% get that. Yes, he's vocal, but he's still a good player. He's not selfish, which is weird. You would think he would be, but he's not a selfish player. And he's a good teammate, and people like him, so I don't know why you would get rid of him. I think he gets paid decent enough, but I think you need all the help you can get on that offense, because that defense is just awful. You need help all along the defense, and you probably need some more offensive linemen. Kyle Long is really good at guard, but I think other than that, you could use some help all around the offensive line. Matt Forte is solid at running back. He's another one. He's one of those underrated guys who should be considered a top 5 running back, but a lot of people, including myself, overlook him. He did a lot in the passing game. What did he have for his stats? What did he have? Receiving stats. Yeah, 100. Okay, that's what I thought. 102 catches this season for 808 yards. He is a dual threat running back. And Matt Forte is definitely someone. That's a throwback to Priest Holmes and LaDainian Tomlinson. That's what you're getting out of Matt Forte. And I'm surprised you don't see a lot more running backs doing this. I think LaShawn McCoy is kind of up there doing that. And I think other than that, you've got a lot of poor man's guys doing that. Like Jamal Charles will catch a ball, but he'd rather run it. Same thing with Arian Foster and Marshawn Lynch. He'll catch the ball, but they'd rather just run the ball down your throat. So I think the Bears on offense should be all set, but that defense is abysmal, and it could just come down to having a better coach. Because I don't think Mark Trestman was that great of a coach. I think people just wanted him to be. So I think it'll be an abysmal year for the Bears. And then next up, we have the NFC South. Blech. We're going to go in the order from the best team to the worst. And even though the record states that, I feel like that is subjective. So the division winner was the Carolina Panthers. They managed to win this division. They are I don't think any team in this division regresses because I don't think you can get much worse. I mean, Atlanta, they have to do better than 6-10, right? They were 5-1 in their division. Arguably, they should have been, they were the best, but they couldn't win outside of their division. Who'd they beat? Outside of their own division. They upset the Steelers. Oh, I'm looking, So the Falcons should have won that. I was looking at the wrong schedule. I feel like it was the Steelers they beat. I was totally looking at the Saints schedule. I don't know why I pulled that one up. I'm supposed to be talking about the Panthers. Panthers, their defense came along at the end of the season. Cam Newton was hurt. I'm really starting to like them as an organization, though. You hear the letters about the one kid who was a free agent fan because he didn't have he didn't have a team around him, so he sent handwritten letters to all 32 teams, and the only team to write back and send him some stuff was the Carolina Panthers. Ron Rivera had his house burned down. You heard about this little girl sent him the $5 that she had gotten from the Tooth Fairy to help him rebuild his home. He sends it back with a letter. So as an organization, I really like the Panthers, and I will root for them to win a third straight division title. But it's going to be tough. I don't know what they're going to do at running back. Jonathan Stewart seemed to come on at the end of the season, and I think D'Angelo Williams will be gone. But you never know with Ron Rivera. He kind of really likes him. And he's been past his prime for a couple seasons, but they seem to just want to keep him around. Wide receivers, Kelvin Benjamin showed some promise, but they could probably use another one. Greg Olsen is a stud at tight end. I think you're okay there. Offensive line, I think just in general, all 32 teams, you can never have enough offensive linemen, even if you are the Browns or the Cowboys. You can just always use another one. But I think the Panthers, they had some injuries. Their defense didn't click right away, and that probably cost them early in the season. So they won a playoff game, and you can say it was against the Cardinals, but they still won a playoff game, and that's something. Next up is the New Orleans Saints, the team that I thought was going to make the Super Bowl. Not making that mistake again. This team, I saw this on ESPN. They were going over the salary cap numbers. The New Orleans Saints are in the worst salary cap situation in the league. They are $27 million over the salary cap. $27 million over the salary cap. Jay Cutler is the highest paid player in the NFL? Or at least the highest paid offensive player? You could release him and not have any cap penalties from him, and you would still be $4 million over the cap. I don't know what this team is going to do. I really don't know what this team is going to do. It's not like Drew Brees is going to retire. He's still going to keep playing, and it's not like they're going to release him because what are you going to do after that? Why would you release Drew Brees? It's not his fault the team is terrible. He had kind of a down year, but he wasn't that bad. He still led the league in passing yards, or tied for it. I mean, this team, I'd still argue they need a running back. I don't care how good Melvin Ingram looked in stretches. You still got to look at a running back there. Wide receivers, they're all coming down. Brandon Cooks got hurt, so it's hard to really judge him. Marcus Colston, most likely gone. He's due, I think, he cost $12 million against the cap this year. You're $27 million over. You cannot afford to have a legacy player on that kind of salary. And I don't know, restructuring him, what you're going to get him down to. I find it hard to believe you're going to get him from $12 million to, say, 2 or 3 that you're going to need him to be at. So I think he's gone. Jimmy Graham did not look that great, considering he got the big contract. And they need him to step up for that. But really, their defense just let them down. Jarvis Byrd turned out to be a smart idea for the Bills to let him walk, and a terrible idea for New Orleans to give him all that money. And then they benched... Ooh, what is his name? I am forgetting everyone now. Kenny Vaccaro. They benched Kenny Vaccaro, their other safety. Their cornerbacks they just... Linebacker? No, not linebacker. Definitely, no. Defensive line? No, okay. They have no defense, which is going to be a common theme with everyone but the Panthers in the South. They have no defense, and their offense still needs some pieces. So it's not like they can just build entirely on defense. They're still going to need some offensive firepower. Next up, a team that definitely underachieved, like I was just saying earlier, the Atlanta Falcons. They should have won this division. They should have won this division if they had a competent coach. If they had Rex Ryan last season, they would have gone 9-7 and made the playoffs. All they needed was a competent coach. They blew that game against Detroit. They blew that game against Cleveland. You know, they gave Green Bay a run for their money. They gave Pittsburgh a run for their money. Then they got blown out by Carolina in the finale, and that should not have happened. They have a solid offense and an absolutely abysmal, dead last in the league defense. Offensively, they're going to need another tight end. They could probably use some offensive line help, like any other team. They seem to have a little more disarray. I don't think they know who their left tackle is. Matthews didn't seem to be as solid as everyone thought he would be in his first season. He's a rookie. Don't crucify him after one season. Give him some time. He showed some promise. He just wasn't a stud. He just didn't come in and replace Joe Thomas as the best left tackle in the league. It's going to happen sometimes when you're a rookie. Leave him alone. But their defense is just terrible. I mean, it's hard to win when your team is letting all those points go up. I mean, I'm sure it was nice that first game of the year seeing them beat New Orleans 37-34 in overtime. We didn't know that was a sign of things to come, that both the defenses would be completely awful and both these teams would be terrible. We thought it was a great matchup. We thought Atlanta was going to kind of be bad. We thought New Orleans was going to win the division. They ended up, going 0-2? Start the season, 0-3? They were pretty bad from the beginning and they never got better. So, Atlanta, I feel like if Carolina falls off, I think Atlanta's going to win a division next season. Because I don't think it's going to be the Saints. Because they're going to lose too many pieces trying to get under the cap. Atlanta's still got some cap space. And I think just having a better coach. And you could argue that maybe it was Pete Carroll's defense that was winning, but Gus Bradley went to Jacksonville and solidified that defense. So I do think something's going to rub off. And I do think that this team is going to be much better under Quinn. And I think Atlanta could win a division, but they're going to need some pieces for him to play with. And they don't have anything. They don't have a pass rush, a run stuffer. I don't think they have nothing to work with. I think their best defensive player is Croy Bierman, and I only know who the hell he is because my fiance was watching The Real Housewives of Atlanta. That's your defense, folks. That's your defense. And last and certainly least, Eric's Tampa Bay Bucks. I did my midseason power rankings. I said they were the worst team in the NFL, and look who's sitting at number 1 for the overall pick. They released Josh McCown. Mike Glennon is a trade candidate. I'd like to see him in Buffalo. And you just know they're taking a quarterback, but is it going to be Mariota? Is it going to be Winston? Winston's going to be better on the field. Mariota's going to be better off the field. Do you need leadership on that offense? I feel like the answer is yes. But as a team, Gerald McCoy just signed long-term. Unlike Ndamukong Suh, he seems like a generally good guy. And I think if you wanted to take a Jameis Winston, you can afford that risk. I mean, you're 2-14. You have no risk. The worst you're going to do is 1-15 or 0-16. There's not a lot to go lower down, and it's not like Tampa Bay's never been winless before during a season. So, the floor they're already there. So I'd say take Winston. Mariota's iffy on the field. Winston's iffy off the field, but that can turn around. And I think that Tampa Bay, they're not going to contend next year. They're just not. I was stupid. I was foolish. I bought in like everyone else thinking they were going to be a wild card team this year. They are not going to be one next year. They're in a terrible division, so by all means they could win their division next season. That is in the realm of possibility. They had the first overall pick. They were 5 games back of winning their division. It is that up in the air. And a 5-win turnaround, going 7-9 is not out of the realm of possibility for Tampa Bay. Because they went 0-6 in their division. They could just split in their division and be better. And then win a couple of those close games. And, so maybe Tampa Bay can make some noise. And they're not going to make the playoffs. But I think, let's see, what were the tight games? I mean, St. Louis, they lost by 2 points. So that could have been a win there. Carolina was a 6-point loss. New Orleans, they lost in overtime. And then they blew the game against New Orleans later. The second Carolina game was a 2-point game. Cincinnati was a 1-point game. Chicago was 8, so Cleveland was 5. I mean, they could very easily turn it around and get to 7 wins next year, but I'm sorry, Eric, it's not going to be a playoff team. Not this season. Because they're going to get a quarterback. Is he going to be good the first year? I have my doubts. They need a running back. Doug Martin is not that good. He had one good game, and that was it. Receivers, they're all set. They got Mike Evans. If they keep Jackson, then I think they'll be okay, but it sounds like he could be a release candidate. But again, there's more wide receivers. Tight ends, I don't know if they know what they're doing with tight end yet. They drafted, is it Safarian Jenkins? Is it Safarian? I don't know how to say the first part of his last name. But they took him. Offensive line, they have a couple pieces. They could use a couple more. Defense, they definitely could use some help. You figure Gerald McCoy is a stud. They lost him for a couple games, but it was too late at that point. They have, I just blanked on his name, but the linebacker's really good. The secondary, they have pieces. They have pieces, and I think a solid draft could get them to 7 wins. But I don't think, unless some underachieving players step up their game, if Doug Martin decided to be a player that everyone seems to think is a top 5 running back, if they got that to help either Winston or Mariota, and then that would in turn make the rookie quarterback look better and get, more out of the wide receivers, and the tight ends sort of step up and the offensive line gels. Yeah, it's not another own possibility to see this team go 9-7 and win their division, but again, that's because they're in a terrible division, and I don't think it's going to happen. But stranger things have happened. I mean, a 7-8-1 team, we thought after the Seahawks went 7-9 won the division, we'd never see that again. We might see it again 2 years in a row. But now let's move on to the NFC West, and we'll start off with the reigning NFC champions, the Seattle Seahawks, who are going to be in some trouble next season, I think. I think Marshawn Lynch will be back at this point. I think he will be back. And I don't think that's going to be their issue. I think their issue is going to be their defense early in the season, because Cam Chancellor had a quad injury, torn quad. Earl Thomas had the separated shoulder. And Sherman may or may not need Tommy John surgery. Right now they're saying he doesn't. That could change in a month. And when it drags on that long, you just never know. And then Byron Maxwell is a free agent, and he may or may not be back, depending on their cap situation. Russell Wilson's going to get paid. And everyone's talking about, is he going to be one of the highest paid guys? That depends on Russell Wilson. Is he going to be a $25 million a year quarterback? Is he going to be a $15 million a year quarterback? Take less money to let the team be better. I could see him going either way on that. He seems like he would definitely take less money to have a better team around him. I mean, he's enjoyed so much success early in his career. But this team needs some wide receivers. Baldwin and Kearse, they're nice role players. But you put them in New England and you're fine. You put them on Seattle, and it's not that Russell Wilson isn't a great quarterback, because he is. He's a top 5 quarterback. But that's not his game. He's not a Peyton Manning or a Tom Brady where he's going to make you better. He's going to throw the ball to you. He's going to make a good throw, but you need to make that play. And he doesn't have anybody who can make that play consistently. Tight end, Luke Wilson, they might ride him through another year. This team drafts well, so I'm sure, with a deep wide receiver class, maybe they'll pick up another one. I don't think they're going to have the money to jump on, say, a Larry Fitzgerald or anyone along those lines if he becomes available, but stranger things have happened. But I think if Lynch comes back, Wilson's going to be there. If they add another weapon at wide receiver, their offensive line is built to be a run-blocking offensive line. So, if they could get a more balanced offensive line or does better play out of that, it would help the passing game, but I don't think they're interested in that right now. But defensively, I think that Legion of Boom is going to be hurting. I think their defense will still be good, but I think early in the season it will falter, much like it did this season, but maybe even worse. This could be a 500 team going into Week 8, depending on how injuries play into it. Or they could be perfectly fine, who knows. But these injuries are tricky, and you got arguably your 3 best players, especially your 3 best players on defense, all of them injured. And as good as your linebackers are, and as good as your defensive line can be, it's called the Legion of Boom, and that's what you're known for. And 75% of your Legion of Boom is hurt, so it could be a major problem for them. Next up would be the Arizona Cardinals. I think this team will regress, but I still think they could go 10-6 and make a run for a wild card spot. Carson Palmer, is he going to play next year? Probably not at this point. So what do? Josh McCown's free agent. You could bring him back to Arizona. Guys, I was just kidding. They're not going to bring Josh McCown back. That's not going to be a thing that happens. But I do think their offensive line played better this season, but they could maybe another piece. They could definitely use a running back. I don't think Ellington is the answer there. I don't think they have the answer on their roster. I don't think they've had an answer on their roster for a long time. They keep trying to bring in retreads or trying to look sort of anywhere else. Like Jonathan Dwyer, is he the answer? Andre Ellington, Stephen Taylor, Kerwin Williams was their best running back, arguably. It's not a good sign. I mean, Andre Ellington, 660 yards, a 3.3 attempt for 3 touchdowns. Kerwin Williams had a 4.6 average for 246 yards, no touchdowns. They need a running game to go with what they're doing right now. And they're going to need a good young prospect, and I don't think that's Logan Thomas. So I think... But their defense, I think they were just riddled with injuries. I think they'll be okay if everyone can come back healthy, not suspended, etc. And wide receiver is Larry Fitz. If Fitz is coming back, then I think they're okay there. But if he doesn't, that's a big void. Even if Michael Floyd was the better receiver this season, having both of them on the field is a big help. And I mean, they have a pretty good 3 wide receiver set there. But with Floyd, Fitzgerald, and then John Brown. And, Andre Ellington isn't a bad receiver out of the backfield, but he's not very good as a running back, and that's a problem. That's when you get into Reggie Bush territory, and that's not something you want to risk. But losing Larry Fitzgerald, that could be an issue. And I think they're honestly better off trying to restructure his deal as opposed to just cutting him. And again, this is a deep class of wide receivers and for rookies, but they have needs elsewhere with that top pick. And even in free agency, why wouldn't you just keep Larry Fitzgerald if he's arguably going to be the best wide receiver in the market anyways? So I think they might be better off just restructuring him. They need to clear up the space, but not to the point that they need to just shed him completely. Next up is the 49ers. I am not a Jim Tom Sula fan, and I think 8-8, it could be a repeat performance. I certainly don't see an improvement on this with that head coach. I don't know what's going to happen with Colin Kaepernick. I don't know how much of an improvement is going to be made with him. He needs some work. He needs some confidence built back into him. He needs to get his head in the game, because I think he's built up his little ego now where he thinks he can do everything and he just can't. So I do think they need to fix him. Frank Gore, is he going to be back? I don't think he will now. I think with a new head coach, I think they might just let him go and bring someone else in, but that leadership is valuable with a rookie head coach whose entire experience he had one interim head coach game. That was it. And a lot of people say, oh, he's got a 1-0 record. Whoop-de-doo. It doesn't mean anything. So, I do think the 49ers I don't think they're going to regress, but I think they're going to stay at 8-8. I think that's roughly where they are. They're talented enough, especially on the defensive side of the ball, to get better. Ray McDonald is gone, finally. I don't know how many times he has to beat the crap out of women for them to get rid of him, but they finally got rid of him. But the defense is still solid. Otherwise, and if anything, they have an issue now because they have Patrick Willis and Andrew Borland. Andrew Borland? Jason Borland? Borland, whatever his first name is. So they've got a good issue to have there. They've got depth at linebacker, which has always been a strength of theirs anyways. So defensively, they're fine. Offensively, it's just how's the team going to be, but it comes down to coaching. And how is the coaching going to respond? What is Tom Sula going to do? Jim Harbaugh was arguably one of the top 3 or 4 coaches in the NFL for the last 4 years. He left from Michigan, obviously. They forced him out. I don't think Tom Sula is the top 4 coach, and even if he's the top 15 coach, I don't think that's enough to get them over the 8-8 hump now. No matter how talented their team is. And if they do any well, I do think it comes down to the talent that they have, and not necessarily the coaching job done. So this will be an interesting season to watch with San Francisco. I do think they can get back in a wild card spot because I think the Lions fall off, and I think the Cardinals could fall off, and I think that would open up the Eagles and the 49ers to sort of take those 2 spots. And last but not least, we have the the St. Louis Rams. In what seems to be their swan song season in St. Louis, they're moving forward with the, Stan Kroenke's moving forward with the stadium in Los Angeles that is seemingly going to house both the Rams and it seems like the Chargers are the most likely candidate. It seems like, those 2 plus the Raiders could all be playing in LA in a couple of years. Who even knows? I don't think the Rams are long for St. Louis, though. I'm sorry for the people from St. Louis. It's not like they've been good for a while anyways. You had the greatest show on turf, and that's been the highlight of the St. Louis Rams. It was 3 years of terrible football, the greatest show on turf for 4 years, one of those seasons led by Mark Bolger, and then terrible football ever since. So you're not going to be losing a lot of history. So they have pieces all over the place. They have a solid defensive line. Their linebackers are young. They could develop into something better. Their secondary is young and can keep developing. Sam Bradford is a big question mark, but he's not a bust. He just can't stay healthy. We don't know, but he's getting paid like $20 million next season. They can't keep him for that price. The running game is a mess. The wide receivers are awful. The tight ends arguably is their strongest point, but even there, that can't carry your offense having a good tight end. The offensive line, there's some pieces, but, Justin Long, is he going to play for more than 3 games next season? You don't know. There's so many question marks. And as much as everyone likes to say that Jeff Fisher is a top-tier NFL head coach, the simple fact is he isn't. He just had a long tenure in Tennessee, and unlike Andy Reid's tenure in Philadelphia, it wasn't always good. I think he had 3 winning seasons, and there was, I think, a 14-2 season in there. But Jeff Fisher is not, by any means, an elite Hall of Fame level NFL coach. He might make it to the NFL Hall of Fame because of the tenure he has, but he is not that great of a coach. And I do think this will be his last season if they can't turn it around. And I don't know if they can turn it around because I don't know what they're getting at quarterback. I really don't. You're either getting Sean Hill, who Detroit Lions 0-16 quarterback, Austin Davis, who came on strong, but then as soon as teams figured out what he did, buried him, and Sam Bradford, who might not even play in the season. He might get injured getting out of his car at the stadium before the first preseason game. So it's just a huge question mark. When you don't have a quarterback or a running back, it really just complicates what otherwise could be a pretty good team. So I'm sorry, St. Louis, and I'm really sorry that their first season in Los Angeles, they might be a playoff team, but that's just how it's going to go. But that is now the NFC portion of my off-season preview. Again, if you guys didn't see it or hear it yesterday, I did my AFC preview yesterday. So be sure to check that out as well. Be sure to leave a like on both these videos if you would please. And thank you guys so much for listening. I probably won't be back next week. I probably will wait until... When does free agency start? Probably next week, right? I never actually know the official start date. I feel like it's another week from now. I'll probably wait until March 10th? Why did I think it was sooner than that? Okay, so March 10th. So there's a very good chance that you won't see me again until after a few, maybe about 3 or 4 days of free agency for some moves to happen. I'm not really going to have anything to talk about until then. So thank you guys so much for listening, and I will see you guys next time.